Hi, and welcome to the Share Parenting channel. I wanted to talk about something today that is a bit of a peeve of mine. Probably because it strikes a nerve, it's personal for me. But I wanted to talk about the theory or the narrative that you should create suffering for your children to make them stronger. Um, this theory really comes from the repetition compulsion. When people have had suffering, they want to create suffering in other people, even on an unconscious level. Like they might not think of it that way, right? Because what happens is when we survive childhood trauma, we have to find ways to cope with that. One of the ways we cope with that is to find pieces of it that we are okay with. And some of those stories sound like, oh, well, at least it made me stronger. Here's the thing. Trauma does not make you stronger. You might have been a strong person. You might have been a resilient person, and you might have had somebody to support you or some way to draw on your resilience and resources to overcome certain scenarios. But it was not the trauma that made you strong. You were strong and you managed to get through that trauma. Also, when we really look at it, it is never unscathed. And I don't like using the word never, never. The idea that because I grew up and got married and have a job means like I'm totally unscathed from my childhood. That's not true. And it's insulting when I hear it. And I hear it kind of often. Like, oh, well, you turned out great. So, really, you have nothing to complain about. You see great. I'm the one that lives with an anxiety disorder. I'm the one that went through an eating disorder. I'm the one that was self-harming for 10 years, trying to cope with the amount of overwhelm that childhood trauma created for me. I'm the one that had no capacity to have healthy relationship because I was so desperately codependent and I couldn't even see how real and healthy should look. I'm the one that would throw up in her car from nerves and anxiety before work every day for years. I'm the one that knows all of that. Nobody else knows those things. I'm the one that had panic attacks for years that nobody knew about. And I feel like we're missing the point. If we're judging whether someone's fine by whether they have a job or have a relationship, we're missing a lot of nuance. Just because you have a job, just because you have a relationship, doesn't mean that it hasn't been a hell of a fight to get there. And I don't expect every single person to dive into the rabbit hole of every single other person. That's ridiculous. At all. Like I'm not certainly not expecting anybody to want to get into the nitty-gritty of my life, nor do I particularly enjoy sharing any of it. My point is that you have to remember that there are sides of people that you do not see. So what might be easy for you to look at and say, oh, they're fine. You don't know. You don't know what goes on behind the scenes. You don't know what they're dealing with in their private life. You don't know the struggles that are invisible to you that plague them every single day. You don't know. And it is not fair to look at somebody's forward-facing image and use your interpretation of that to dismiss or diminish the impact of their trauma. And then furthermore, because this is where my actual point is, to take that misunderstanding and then say, oh, well, we should recreate that kind of trauma for children. Because look, it made her strong. No, it didn't. No, it came really close to breaking me forever. And you don't know which kind of kid you have. You don't know whether they're the kind of kid that has, internal grit and resources already, and they're going to deal with this traumatic thing and seem to come out on top and move on and whatever. You don't know if they're going to start numbing with drugs and alcohol at 12 and not stop and end up in prison because they accidentally ran their car into somebody off the road. You don't know if you're going to traumatize this kid and they're going to realize vulnerability is traumatically unsafe. I will never feel vulnerable again and completely build that wall and shut off all of their emotional vulnerability and become that narcissist that we're all so fond of pointing out these days. You don't know. What we do know is trauma is bad for kids. Period, point blank. If you want to build persistence, help your kids stick with things. Now, that doesn't mean forcing your 4-year-old to play football because he said he was interested in it, because 4-year-olds can't commit to things. Okay. That means when they are having a really hard time with the thing, when they're 1.5 and they're trying to stack it and they're just like, you don't just do it for them. You sit next to them. You're like, oh man, that's tough, huh? Yeah, it's not staying how you want it. You feel frustrated. I feel that way sometimes too. You sit in it with them. That gives them persistence. That gives them the ability to believe in themselves that they can feel hard things and not die from it. Because our kids aren't born knowing that. It sounds obvious, but our kids are not born knowing all of these big feelings are going to hit us. And it's okay because we can feel them. We can get through them. They don't know that. They're just these little like people brand new to the world and they're just do. Oh my God, now I'm overwhelmed with rage. What is that? Right? And we're the ones that are there to teach them. The problem is that most parents today were raised by parents who were raised by parents who were raised by parents who could not tolerate that realm of emotion, likely because they themselves were traumatized, or at the very least did not have their emotional needs met. And to be fair, we didn't really know about emotional needs. I know that sounds ridiculous, but like the science that has proven the importance of all of the emotional attunement and attachment wasn't super broadly known. There was attachment research available to our parents to a degree, if they had access to it, but it was more about being responsive to your infants, right? The idea of helping your 6-year-old through a meltdown instead of just punishing him for having a meltdown really hadn't entered the picture. And certainly it hadn't applied to your 10-year-old or your 13-year-old or your 17-year-old. And so as we've done this research and as we've studied the developing brain of children, we're realizing just how underdeveloped they are. This narrative that they're choosing to throw a fit. No, they're not. No, they're not. Because see, they prefer to be regulated just like all of us. And if they had the choice of a matter, they would just be regulated. But in that moment, with those stressors, with that load already on their shoulders, whatever that is, they can't prevent their emotional brain from taking over. So us demanding that they get it together, snap out of it, whatever, is actually taking away from their perseverance, from their grit, from their resilience. We think that those things look like don't have feelings. And that's actually not true. The most resilient people are able to sit in that space of overwhelming feelings and go, yep, this feels awful. And I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to numb it out. I'm not going to lash out at people to try to discharge my own energy. I'm going to sit in it. So if you want your kids to be all of those great things, do not work on trying to create suffering in their life or create hardship in their life. There's already hard. But also, do not try to fix everything. Do not try to take their feelings away. Do not try to squash their feelings angrily. Do not try to distract their feelings happily. Be in it. Teach them this is what that is. Feelings like jealousy are really hard. It is painful to feel scarcity and anxiety. I get it. I get it. You're a human. You're going to feel these things sometimes, just like me, just like your other parent, just like your siblings, just like your cousins, whomever, right? We all feel these things sometimes. And it is not for us to judge whether these feelings are right or wrong. They're just there. They don't need to be right or wrong because the feelings don't have to determine the outcome. We're sitting in the feelings. My kid's really sad because my daughter, very sad. because her cousin lives in another state. Okay, I can sit with that. I know what sad's like. I've felt sad before. I've missed people before. So for 2 nights now, we have sat in sad. And I know that by doing that, I am teaching her what sad is, what missing people is, what that feels like, that she's safe even though she feels overwhelmed, that it's okay to cry about it. It actually releases excess cortisol from your brain that you can measure in the tears themselves, that I am a safe person for her to come to forever. We all need safe people forever. We like to demonize like mommy's boys or whatever. Like, no, being 30 years old and being able to call your mom and say, hey, um, this big thing just happened in my relationship. I need somebody to safe to talk to. That can be the thing that saves his marriage. Having a safe person to talk to. That can be the thing that makes him not punch somebody at a bar and end up in prison. I've heard those stories, like not just because of the punch, those poor, I don't know, probably not poor guy, but it's wild to me because you have this argument between two grown adults and it gets a little bit crazy. One punch, and the guy he punched fell, hit his head on a planter, and was gone. And he got manslaughter charges over losing his temper. Like what he thought was going to be this much turned into this much. Right? Why? Because he's not been allowed to express all of his feelings. He's been taught that what's appropriate for men is anger, fighting, and to shove it down, shove it down, shove it down, shove it down until it explodes. The opposite of that isn't being happy all the time. It is allowing our boys to feel sad, jealous, afraid, and not shame them into manning up. Now, again, the feelings don't necessarily dictate the outcome. We might do something anxious. We might do something afraid. We might find strategies to feel worried and then move forward anyway. Those are great life skills. That's not coming from force. That is coming from linking arms and walking together through the hard things. Letting them know, hey, I believe you. I know this is actually really hard for you. And we can sit in it and we can feel it, and that's fine. And as we watch this wave of emotion go up and then come back down, the next step is to start strategizing. Now that you feel seen, now that you feel heard, now that you feel soothed, now we're going to strategize. And I'm your person, so we're going to strategize together. We're going to look at what is making this scary, what is making this hard. How do we come up with solutions? Right? We want our kids to be problem solvers. Focus on solving problems. When we just punish our kids over and over again for whatever infraction that we've decided, we are taking away this huge opportunity to practice problem solving. Instead of, oh, well, you stayed on your screen too long. Now you don't get screen time tomorrow. All right, fine. That sounds fair enough. But what is the skill that is making them stay on the screens? The behaviorist mindset is carrot and stick. Well, clearly, I just need to make him suffer and then he'll remember. It's probably not about remembering. It's probably about underdeveloped prefrontal cortex challenges, executive functioning delays, not even delays per se, just the fact that they're not 25, 26 years old and having fully formed executive functioning skills. It's probably because these shows and these games are literally scientifically designed to be very compelling. Dopamine, 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 dopamine. Have you ever tried? Have you ever tried to get off TikTok and found yourself still scrolling on TikTok? Because I have. I am 35. So if I can fall susceptible to this, how on earth am I shocked that my 8-year-old can? My goal in that is not just to win, to make them listen. It is to build tools in their toolbox of life so that when they are finding themselves struggling with ending an activity and finding that it's taking too much of their time, too much of their energy from their family, from whatever, they know the steps to sit down and analyze that. So that's what we do. The consequence is to solve the problem. All right, I'm going to turn this off, right? That's my boundary. And let's talk about what just happened. What does your brain do when that little thing pops up and says, 10 more minutes? What happens then? Do you notice it? Do you not notice it? Is it just sort of tuned out? Um, is it that you don't know how to guesstimate what 10 more minutes is? Because I don't. I have no idea how long I've been recording right now, and I won't know until I take this video off of Zoom, upload it into an editor, and then see how long it is. Like, no concept, none. And I mean, probably frustrating for some of you who are like, is she still talking? Yes, I am. This is why I do YouTube because long form content is kind of the only way that I work. Um, what is the actual skill that they're finding difficult to master? How do I build support around that skill so that they can move up that skill set's ladder to reach the top and actually have that skill? Punishing them does not teach them any skills. It teaches them, I'm above you. I get to take things away from you. So then, whenever they're above people, they get to take things away from people. It does not help them to actually solve the root problem. Now, are there instances where it looks like it helps? Sure. Go to bed or no video games tomorrow. They'll go in their room. But are they learning how to analyze, why am I having a hard time getting to bed? What is it I'm afraid of missing out on? What am I feeling that I don't want to feel? They're not learning any of that. So then they'll be 34 going, yeah, I kind of just stay up till like 2 in the morning until I pass out. Well, like I have to get up for work at 7, but meh, that's just what I've always done. Right? Or they're in their room up. They're not, maybe aren't bothering you, but they're not sleeping either. Maybe they do go in their room, and as soon as they are laying there still, they go to sleep. But do they understand that? Do they understand that their body is struggling with separation? It loves mom and dad. It wants to be there with the family, and they love that attachment, and sleep is a separation. Do they understand that that is hard for them? And that when they are consciously choosing to soothe themselves, maybe via a rice pillow that goes over their eyes, maybe via a weighted blanket, maybe via um, one of the rice socks you can heat up underneath their feet, maybe with a photo of mom and dad, maybe with being tucked in really tight, right? There's all kinds of things that are very soothing to sleep. If they understand their own struggle and they've participated in solving that problem, that set of tools goes with them forever. If they were just threatened and told to go to bed or else, they never developed those tools. They become what we call an insomniac. I mean, personal experience here. So, can some kids certainly learn differently and maybe they do develop their own little strategies and stuff? Sure. It's not a straightforward calculation. But what is straightforward is that if you work on the skills and the tools that they need, they're much more likely to learn them than if they are left to their own devices to figure it out for themselves. They're supposed to need us. If we were the type of species that did not need to explicitly teach our kids things, then we would be like the sea turtles. We'd just plop them out somewhere and then leave. They'd fend for themselves. But that is not the case. We have the most complex brain, and we live in a very complex world. There's a lot of strategy that goes into making sense of our brains and making sense of the world and making those two things work together. That's my goal. And the more that I approach things from a place of I'm in control and I'm gonna just take things away from you, I'm gonna punish you for whatever, the less time I'm spending solving problems. The more that I look at those situations going, that's odd. I wonder what is causing this. The more I'm training my kids to look at things as problems to solve. That's building their resilience, that's building their persistence, they're building their problem solving, that's building their creativity, it's building their open-mindedness. It's building their compassion and empathy and respect. All of the things that we say that we want. You do not have to traumatize your kids to make that happen. You do not have to look for ways to create hardship for them. You look at the situations as they are, and the ones that aren't going the way that you would like them to go, you figure it out together. What is making this hard? What part of this is hard? What do you think is getting in the way of accomplishing this? What supports would make it feel more doable? There's so many examples. This is essentially what we do in coaching with every single problem that comes up. My kid won't go to sleep at night. My kid won't do his chores. My kid won't do his homework. My kids keep fighting. Um, my kid won't turn off the screens. All of these things. Okay, how old is your kid? Where are they at developmentally? Because those are two different answers. What is making this hard for them? What is the pattern that you've established for most of their childhood? That's one of the things that maybe we don't talk about as much. But if we are utilizing punishments over and over and over again, we're really teaching our kids they don't have to listen to us. We don't even expect them to because we've got, consequences lined up. We know they're not going to listen to us, so why would they? When we stop using consequences, first of all, if you've used them for a long time, you really have to like make an announcement. You have to prove to your children that this is going to change. It is certainly harder. It's much easier to do this from much younger. But if the consequence of things not going well is that you team up and you solve the problem, then they expect that you expect them to do as you ask. And that when they don't, there's going to be some kind of conversation. We're going to sit down and figure that out because you don't just say things willy-nilly for no reason. You also are teaching them how to advocate for themselves, how to have healthy boundaries. Anybody who was staying in my home who refused to take their dishes off the table, I would want to know, what? What is that? I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. I don't actually understand. You seem to be bothered by my asking you to put your dishes in the sink. Like, if that was an adult, I would really want to know. And they might have a reason, right? Maybe that was like a great source of turmoil in their upbringing. Interesting, right? And then I have my boundaries, what I will or will not do. I may go ahead and put their stuff in the sink because it feels supportive. I may choose to not have that person at my home very much because I don't particularly like cleaning up after them. I may ask them what they're doing to work through that particular baggage or trauma or trigger or whatever word you want to use, um, so that they can overcome it, right? That's a fair question to ask an adult, especially somebody who's close enough to be at my house. Like I don't have a bunch of random stuff, people at my house. Um, I have the power to decide those things. So the same thing applies when my kids do it. I'm like, hey, bowl in the sink, please. And they just do it. And if they don't, then I will want to make sure that I'm communicating clearly. I want to get close to them. I want to make some sort of contact. Every kid is different. My kids, usually it's like on their cheeks. It's like, hey, look at me for a second, right? Not all kids can look at you. Looking at you does not equal listening to you, particularly for some autistic kids. They can listen to you without looking at you, and it's very uncomfortable for them and very distracting to them to do so. Don't force somebody to look at you. For my particular child with an auditory processing issue, looking at me means he can read my lips a little bit better. And that is actually important for him. This is usually the kid that has not processed a request. And I know that. I know that about his unique brain. So I'm like, hey, your bowl's on the table. And then 99 out of 100 times he'll go, oh, I forgot. And he'll run and grab it. I just noticed the problem and he jumped to solve the problem because that's what we do here. When there's a problem, we solve the problem. So much so that sometimes we have to say, I don't want to solve the problem. I just want to like vent about it because we're used to solving the problem. And that is a life skill that they can take forever. When we start labeling immaturity in a lot of bad ways, my kid is so lazy, my kid is so ungrateful, my kid's so disrespectful. we are putting them into this category of like hopelessness and frustration and resentment. When we feel badly about our child, we're going to treat them worse. We, when we are able to own that we're doing that and be really honest, because it's probably uncomfortable. We love our kids. You wouldn't be watching this video if you didn't love your kids. We don't want to think badly of them, but we feel like helpless. We're like, okay, but I do. Right. But we actually can ooh, that's a hard word. Rewrite those thoughts. Why do you think it is lazy to not put your bowl in the sink? Who told you that? Where did that come from? How else can you label that behavior? Right? When you have an underdeveloped brain and your executive functioning does not work as well as it one day will, there's going to be gaps. And it's okay if those gaps are present in childhood, because that's kind of the point. We're helping them fill those gaps. That's our job. If we are resentful at what we signed on to do, I shouldn't have to ask you, why not? You're teaching them the culture of your home. So it falls to you to teach them that. And not one time, hundreds of times. If it's persistent and it seems like they're avoiding it, that's when you problem solve. What is making this hard for you? What about it? I don't know. I just forget. Okay, what can we do to help you remember? Right? Maybe you put up a little sign. Maybe you have a bell in the middle of the table. People hit the bell when they're done with dinner and they hit the bell again when they're done putting their dishes in the sink. You know, there's so many fun, silly, creative things that you can do to instill good patterns and habits. But when you're doing that, it is going to take a lot of consistency. It's going to take a lot of patience and practice and viewing that activity as that's cool, we're building. Have you ever built a toothpick bridge? I had to build a toothpick bridge for a gate class, like fifth grade or something. It's a lot of toothpicks. It's kind of how I imagine this stuff. We're building a toothpick bridge for 18 or so years. And every little piece seems insignificant. Every individual time seems like this is going nowhere. But over the course of time, it builds and it builds and it builds. I talk about Simon Sinek referencing the the short-term versus long-term game. And I forget what he calls the short-term game. The long-term is the infinite game. The goal of a short-term game is to win. And a lot of parents get stuck in that trap. Every conflict with their child, they just want to win. The goal of a long-term game is to keep the game going. That's where I want to be in my parenting. I want to maintain relationship with these people that I created forever until the day I die. And if that is my goal, it's not so important whether I win this particular argument. It gives me a lot more grace. It gives me a lot more perspective and patience that we're playing the long game. We are not focused on whether they have everything right today at 10 years old, at 15 years old. And it's very misleading that childhood ends at 18 because brain development doesn't. So even if you have a 15-year-old and you're like, he's going to be moved out of the house in 2.5 years, he has to get all this accomplished. He's got a, over a decade of brain growth left in executive functioning, which involves all of the being on timeness, the time management, all of the organizing and cleaning and tidying, all of the prioritization of tasks, all of it. All of it. He's not done yet. You do not have to have him perfected by 18. That's not a thing. He's his own person on his own journey. And yeah, he's still going to show you the gaps. And there's still opportunity to help him learn the skills and the tools that help him to fill those gaps so that he can lean on those experiences that he had with you to do that for himself when he's in college or after or whatever, trade school or his career or whatever he decides to do. It's a different mindset. It's a different place to be. And it really comes from rejecting fear. I reject this idea that if my kids are not perfected by some magic set point, that they're doomed and I've failed. I reject that entirely. I reject the idea that if my 10-year-old is emotional, that he's going to have no grit in his adult life. 10-year-olds are not little adults. They're 10. If adults are able to learn and develop skills and grow and get better at things, how on earth are we thinking that our kids are magically going to just stop at 18? It's not a thing. But if I want to continue to have influence in their life, one thing I guarantee you that I need is relationship. And I think that's some of the fear too. As their kids get older, they realize they have less and less control, as well they should. But if you haven't been relying on control, if you've been relying on relationship, you never lose that. So that's what we do. We rely on relationship, we solve problems, we link arms and walk through the hard stuff together. We feel the things without judgment, they just exist. And we build skills and tools to regulate, to hold space for feelings, to get the messages that the feelings are trying to give us, to find solutions that work for each of the people involved, which means we're using our empathy to recognize what the other people's needs might be, and we're self-advocating for our own needs and boundaries. These are life skills that we start very young. Most times these kinds of conversations um, don't become super relevant until like 4.5-ish, but they can start to take place. 3-year-olds can sometimes tell you an idea, um, especially stuff like, what part is hard? Um, Questions like that. But asking why, just flat, why did you do that? Is very, very hard for kids under 7 to answer. They don't think that way. Even under 11, there's particularly socially, there was something that I was reading that was talking about how asking a kid under 11, why they got into that fight with their friend or why they said something to their friend that way, they often don't know. It's very impulsive. And so that's not the same as really problem solving. Okay, so what happened before then? And then this happened. What were you hoping was going to happen if this happened? What would you have liked to happen instead of what did happen? How do you wish it would have gone? Okay, so if you wish it would have gone like that, I wonder if there's another strategy we could have used next time so that it's more likely to go like that, right? It's kind of how I talk to parents. Okay, what was happening before? Oh, mom and dad were getting divorced, and that's a lot of stress and trauma for this little 4-year-old. Okay, and then he started spitting, and then you put him in timeout, and he kept spitting. What were you hoping would happen? Oh, you're hoping that he would quit spitting. Okay, so if that's your goal, timeout's not doing it. He's spitting to show you how he's feeling inside. Just punishing him does not give him another way to show you how he's feeling inside. It doesn't give him a safe way to spit. He feels completely out of control. His family and his life is falling apart. How do children communicate when they don't have the words? Through their behavior. Do all humans communicate when they don't have the words? Through their behavior, but especially little people. And in that case, anytime that he's feeling a loss of control, it comes out in this way. So how do we make it safe for him to spit? And then how do we help him learn what that even is? The words for what he's going through. And then perhaps other ways that he can express it. Right? That's what problem solving looks like with a kid who cannot really tell you that. It looks like a lot of empathy, a lot of guess and check, right? Um, and then trying a strategy, gathering the feedback information. If it works, great. If it doesn't, try a new strategy. So it requires a lot of creativity and openness. But watching you do that for 18 years is certainly going to help your children to develop the idea that they can solve problems, that there's always a way to figure it out, that people that they care about are worth listening to and considering and spending time trying to find a way to make it work with. And because you respect them and you respect their boundaries and you treat them well, that doesn't extend into people pleasing and always trying to give somebody what they want and always trying to give them the upper hand and ending up in bad situations. If you demand that you always win, you are priming them to be with somebody who thinks that they should always win. Or you're priming them to be that. If it's not about winning, if it's about coming together and collaborating, solving problems together, the vast majority of the time, then that's the kind of relationship you're priming them to look for. Now, you are the parent. There are certain things that are just a no, and that's okay. And then you sit in the feelings. You're really disappointed that I will not buy you that puppy. I know. I know you're so sad. You really, really wanted that puppy. If you had a magic wand, I bet you would have that puppy like that. I know. I know. I told you why. Do you remember what I said? I don't think you're really asking why. I think you just feel really sad. I can tell you why again. And you're in it. And you're with them. You're not trying to talk them out of it. You're not trying to, oh, come on, you already have a fish. You just got the fish and you barely pay any attention to it, right? That's trying to make them not feel, trying to justify your boundary. Your boundary is, I am not in a place where I can take care of a puppy. I will not be buying a puppy. I will not have a puppy in my home. We can visit the puppy. We can pet the puppy. We can visit people's homes that have puppies. I will not be taking care of a puppy in my home. That is my boundary. And now you get to feel all of those things, the lack of control, the frustration, the hating to be little and wishing that you could grow up and have your own house and 100 puppies, right? All of those things, those are normal, healthy feelings. You are grieving. That's what that is. It is their experience with grief. And it is so important that we allow our children to grieve. It is how things don't get stuck. It is how we teach our body to move through the ups and downs of life. There you go again. Resilience, grit, determination, persistence. I'm not saying don't say no. I'm not saying don't have rules. I'm saying when you run into a situation where things are not going the way that you would like, problem solve first. Focus on winning very last. Focus on meeting your needs and their needs first and problem solving how to make that happen. So if you find that switch challenging, which even I do, so fair, you are welcome to contact me. We can do a free call, bit.ly/callsammy. Something quick that I can give you a couple tips on, as well as talking about the other things that I offer, such as one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and classes. So I look forward to speaking to you soon, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.